Somebody Else's Prince, Part 4. When the Princess Jen-shi-an-ella heard that the prince had been taken away to be executed, she dropped straight down onto the ground and burst into tears. And her tears rained all over the garden in showers, and wherever they fell, flowers began to grow. First of all, snowdrops and primroses, daffodils and red poppies, white lilies, hollyhocks and nasturtiums, and last of all roses, red roses, pink roses, yellow roses, all sorts of roses, and the scent from all of these flowers was so delicious that the little princess lifted her head at last and looked around. "Oh!" she cried, jumping to her feet. "Someone has made the flowers grow in the prince's garden." "Someone certainly has," chuckled a voice from the top of the wall, and there sat the same gremlin as before, looking just as though he'd never gone away to the back of the sun at all. And the same instant the people's voices grew louder than ever from the kingdom close by. "The flowers have learned the way to grow in the prince's garden," they were all saying. "The prince will not be executed after all." Princess Jen-shi-an-ella danced for joy in and out of the prince's bright flower beds. "The prince will not be executed after all," she said. "And he will be able to marry Anenema, the witch's beautiful daughter," added the gremlin. All the laughter died out of Princess Jen-shi-an-ella's face, and she looked at the gremlin in a sad manner. "Oh!" she cried, "I never thought of that. I had quite forgotten he was somebody else's prince." The gremlin looked, and when he saw poor little princess looking so happy, he said, "Don't you fret about that, my little dear. Do you suppose the witch's daughter wants anybody else's prince either?" Princess Jen-shi-an-ella clapped her hands with delight. "Of course she doesn't," she cried. "But perhaps she does not know he is somebody else's prince." "Then go and tell her," suggested the gremlin. Before she had time to thank him for his advice, he had gone off once more to the back of the sun. The little princess did not stop to think about it, but just ran as fast as she could towards the invisible kingdom of Prince Amaryllis. It might seem a little difficult to run towards a place that did not appear to be there, but to anyone who was in such a great hurry as the little princess, a thing like that was of very little importance. So she ran, and she ran, and she ran, until the prince's kingdom was really obliged to stop being invisible. For in all the 100 years that had been bewitched, no one had ever tried so hard to see it before. Besides, it would have been most impolite of anybody's kingdom to go on pretending that it was not there, when the princess was so determined to pretend that it was. So in the end, she suddenly found herself in the middle of a country that was full of trees and rivers and people and houses, and as just the same as any other country, and the particular part of it which she found herself was a nice green field full of woolly sheep. "What a charming kingdom!" exclaimed Princess Jen-shi-an-ella. "How green the trees are, and how fresh everything looks. Why, there's not a speck of dust to be seen." "Of course there isn't," answered a jolly little lamb, who was trying, as lambs will, to behave as though he only had 2 legs instead of 4. "Dust indeed! When a kingdom has not been seen for 100 years, naturally it keeps fresher than a kingdom that has anyone staring at it. Nothing fades a kingdom like staring at it, you know. However, all this will soon be altered, for I hear that the prince had made the flowers grow in his garden. So all he has to do now is marry the witch's daughter, and then we shall be disenchanted at last." "Oh, no, you won't," said Princess Jen-shi-an-ella, shaking her finger at him. "Why not?" asked the lamb, standing still for the first time in his life. "Because the prince is not going to marry the witch's daughter," answered Princess Jen-shi-an-ella, and she ran on before the lamb had time to recover from his astonishment. Down a curly white road ran the little princess, between two of the greenest hedges that she had ever seen, until she came to a stile. Now she had never climbed a stile in her life, so of course she did not know what to do next. However, there stood the stile waiting to be climbed, and there stood the princess, feeling very much inclined to cry, when it happened, most fortunately, that an old woodcutter came strolling along. He was a particularly cross-looking woodcutter, but the princess was in far too great a hurry to notice that. "If you please," she said as politely as she could, "will you lift me over this great big high stile?" The woodcutter at once did as he was asked, and then was so surprised by his own kindness that he stood and stared at the little princess. "Well, I never!" he exclaimed. "That's the first time in my life I ever did anything to please anyone. Are you a witch?" "No, but I'm looking for one," said Princess Jen-shi-an-ella. "Can you tell me where she is?" "If you mean the one whose daughter is going to marry the prince, I think I can," replied the woodcutter, who thought he might as well go on being kind, now that he had been once already. "That is certainly not the witch I mean," answered the princess promptly, "for the prince is not going to marry any witch's daughter." And she ran on faster than ever.
And now it is time for all little children to go to sleep. Good night.